Sua den Aknia Kinyom Chamal Christy. Kinyom Urian Pisa Kamai or Pisa Anglais no Cambodia Beach and Howie. Tiani Kinyom Jung Niie Ambi Peace Corps no Cambodia. Hello everyone, my name is Christy. I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years in Cambodia. I taught English in a small village called Donsar, and today I'm going to tell you about my experience. Where is Cambodia? Does anyone know where Cambodia is? Yes, this green dot, I don't know if you can see it very well, this green dot right here in Southeast Asia. Cambodia is between Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. And if you look over to the right, you see the red province, and that province is called Soi Ring. Soi Ring is the province that I lived in. The village I lived in was Donsar, and that village was less than 5 miles from the Vietnam border. So that meant that in my village, we had a lot of Vietnamese, and we had a lot of Khmer. And that also meant that I was the first white person that many of the people in that area had ever seen. What is Peace Corps? Peace Corps is a service opportunity for motivated change makers to immerse themselves in a community abroad, working side by side with local leaders to tackle the most pressing challenges of our generation. Peace Corps has 3 mission statements, and I'm going to briefly talk about them. The first one says that there are already some trained people in the country, and we want you to come and enhance their training. So for me, that meant I worked with an English teacher in a school, in a community where they already had a school. They already had teachers there, and so I went and I worked with them. I trained with them, and the goal was that I worked with them every day so that after 2 years when I left, the things that we worked on would be sustainable, and they would keep doing it after I left. The second goal says that they will understand Americans better because an American had been there. And if you know anything about Southeast Asia, and particularly Vietnam and Cambodia, a few years ago, not too long, there was a lot of war happening over there, and America was at a huge fault for a lot of bombs that were dropped. So the older generation in Cambodia and Vietnam don't look upon Americans very kindly. And I was one of the first Americans many of these people had ever met. So I'm trying to show them that Americans aren't bad, that we are good. And that was goal 2. Goal number 3 is what I'm doing today and what I'll do the rest of my life. I'll talk about Cambodia and my experience, hoping that people will have a greater understanding of a culture other than our own. Okay. So I get asked this question a lot. Why did I apply? And it was really hard for me to answer for a really long time because not everyone understands why I applied, but my church family will understand. I applied because God put this little nudge in my heart a really long time ago that said, hey, you really love people and you really love serving people, and we're going to do something with that. So I heard about Peace Corps, and I kept hearing about Peace Corps, and I kept talking about Peace Corps. And I talked about Peace Corps for so long that my dad finally said one day, I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. You've talked about it to the point that you could have been there and been back, so get it over with. So I got it over with. But it wasn't because Dad nudged. It was because God got me ready to get it over with. And it's really amazing how every step of the way and all these things in my life built up to me being prepared to go to Cambodia and allowed me to learn things that I didn't even know God was teaching me to get me ready to go to Cambodia. So if you have your Bibles, you can open them to Romans 12, verses 1 through 16. And I want to read that here because I want to talk now more about my journey through this. And these verses, they really just wrap up my whole experience. So if you have your Bibles, you can open to Romans 12, verses 1 through 16. And it says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. Just as each of us has one body with many members, these members do not have the same function. So, in Christ, we who are many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. If it is teaching, let him teach. If it is encouraging, let him encourage. If it is contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it is leadership, let him govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Serve with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with the people of low position. Do not be conceited." And that's my service. I had to love people that I didn't want to love some days. I had to mourn when people in my village died. I had to celebrate when there were weddings of people that I knew and some I didn't know. I was persecuted by people in my village and especially other volunteers. I had to serve because God gave me the heart to serve. This video is going to explain Peace Corps a little bit better, and then we'll go on to the next thing.
Does it have sound, Christy?
Yeah.
Okay, well, give me a second.
Cambodia is a land of stunning beauty and rich traditions. Over 135 Peace Corps volunteers have served in Cambodia since the program was established in 2007.
Congratulations, you are now Peace Corps volunteers.
Volunteers are currently teaching English to Cambodia's future leaders.
Today, we're going to do grammar, past simple. Conjugate it wrong, or eliminate it. Okay? Go to that.
Peace Corps English teachers use interactive games and immersion to engage and challenge their students. Community health education volunteers teach health-related topics like nutrition and HIV/AIDS prevention, working out of rural health clinics. With language training, volunteers are able to effectively communicate with their communities in the local language of Khmer.
It was just learning vocabulary. I'd go over my language lessons with my parents. Dromo, Rom Net, Mot, Tamun, Andat, Chonka, Sma, Dai.
Rice is the lifeblood of Cambodia. They say in Khmer, Nyam Bai Hao Now, have you eaten rice yet? And so I've kind of tried to correct my students' English by saying, no, you need to ask, have you eaten breakfast? Have you eaten lunch? Have you eaten dinner? And they're like, why would we ask that? We just ask, have you eaten rice yet? I'm like, because in America, we don't eat rice for every meal.
Volunteers become active members of their community. They often engage in secondary projects, such as working with community members to paint world maps. The Peace Corps program in Cambodia has already impacted countless lives, both American and Cambodian, and is headed toward a bright future.
So part of my journey was getting through the application process and actually becoming accepted as a volunteer. And then once I was accepted, I had to then accept the invitation in return. And so this was a really long process. The process took about a year or more to complete, and there was a lot of layers to that. It had to be cleared legally and all these different government layers that had to be cleared. And the very last thing that you have to be cleared for as a volunteer is medical. And as some of you know, I haven't been the healthiest all of my life. And it was real evident to me when I got accepted medically, because that was the healthiest I think I've been in a really long time. And that was also God really validating my concerns and saying, no, this is what I want you to do. And I think that's when everyone in my family accepted that, okay, this is what's happening. And then after really debating it, and I fought it. Even though I knew that this is where God was pushing me, I still fought it until the end. And I got an email from Peace Corps saying, okay, you have 24 hours to tell me whether you accept or not. And I called, mentors and pastors that I've had in my life and campus ministers, and I wanted someone to tell me not to go. Anyone to tell me don't do this, and no one did. And I made the decision, and as Mom will say, I didn't call her the next day, and she said that's when she knew I was going. So this is my first month in Cambodia. This is my first time with a chicken, and this is my very first care package. And those care packages were giant blessings. And sometimes I know some of you wrote notes and stuck in those care packages and contributed to those. And you'll never know what those meant to me. So Peace Corps Cambodia has two primary projects. The first one is English teaching, and the second is health education. So I was chosen as an English teacher. And what that meant was I taught at the school 5 or sometimes 6 days a week, depending on my schedule. I taught with a counterpart with every single class I had. The goal was that I would teach them to lesson plan, to grade papers, to write tests properly, basic fundamental skills that teachers in America do that we don't think about as teaching, but skills that they really need to be encouraged to practice and to utilize. And so I taught 5 days a week at my school. The first year I taught with 2 teachers, and the second year I taught with 1 teacher. My secondary project was kind of big, and secondary projects are really challenging for a lot of reasons. You're not forced to do them. It's something that you can do on your own will. It's something that the community and the school and you all have to agree to do together, because if you don't, it's not going to work. I've seen volunteers start a project that their school said, we don't want to do this, and it didn't happen. Because if the school and the community doesn't, they will not make the project happen. So I had to have buy-in. So my first project that I focused on was the environment at the school. And if you look to the left, that's trash at my school. And the top left picture is a classroom. And so there's trash all over the classrooms, and there's trash all over the school. And you would walk through the classroom, and you would kick trash out of the way, and you would hear it fumble in the classrooms. And it was culture shock. I really, really struggled with this really from the first day I got to Cambodia, because the pictures that I saw, the videos that I've seen of Asia, where I saw, beautiful rice paddies and palm trees and things that made me think like, oh, this is paradise. Like, why am I going to this country? And so I struggled with the trash. And so that was the first thing that we did at my school. We did trash cleanup and pickup and education, because I'm having to teach people the importance of throwing trash away. And it's habitual, So they've spent all their lives having something and throwing it on the ground and not thinking, I need to put this in the trash can. So we bought trash cans to put in all the rooms, brooms to put in all the rooms. We had to teach them to sweep, to put the trash in a designated area every day. It was a lot of work. And then we built some flower beds and different things. And then the bottom picture here is the school at the end of my project. So the project here I had to write a grant for. And the process of writing grants is really difficult because it's a government grant. So it's a lot to it. And part of Peace Corps grants means I had to have a 25% buy-in from my community. So they had to be invested in me doing this, requesting the money, and that meant that they had to contribute 25%, whether it's money, goods, labor. It can be combined, but they had to also contribute for this to be successful. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Part of my project was sanitation. So along with picking up trash, we had to teach students the basic fundamentals of washing your hands and why it's important and how to do it. And then how to clean a bathroom and how to use soap properly. So this is me meeting with the village chiefs in my area. And I guess I want to give you a quick lesson on village chiefs. My school is made up of about 12 villages. Each village has a village chief. It's a political position. For anything to happen in the school or the community, it has to have approval from the village chief. The village chief has to approve it, and then these things can happen. So to be a successful volunteer in Cambodia, to really get anything done, you have to gain the trust of the village chiefs. It's really important that you gain their trust. And so one of the ways that I had to do that was I had to go to the temples, I had to participate in traditional ceremonies, I had to be present in the public in places that made me really uncomfortable, that were really hard for me because it wasn't my culture, these weren't my traditions, but I had to do it. I had to show them that I was there, I was invested, and this was something that I wanted them to know. another quick thing about the Village Chiefs, it's really encouraged that all volunteers do this so that they have buy-in from the community. And I'm really proud of all of my villages because I have 12 village chiefs and 9 of them showed up to my meeting that day. So it was a big success for me. So one of my favorite projects that we did was a gardening project. And so we built a giant vegetable garden the size of this room at my school. And I had people that were far more trained than I to come in and teach how to fertilize, how to apply pesticides, and how to make those organically with the materials they had in the village. And this was really important in my village because if you saw on the map, I'm in the south and I'm really close to the ocean. So that meant I had sandy soil, and it's really hard to grow in sandy soil. And so there aren't many vegetables grown in my area. So by teaching them how to grow vegetables, how to increase their yield on vegetables, the goal is that they'll eat more vegetables, malnutrition will decrease, and people will become healthier as an overall effect. So,
Back. Sorry.
oh, it's okay. So I was just gonna, an example is on this left picture, we're burning corn husk, or not corn husk, sorry, rice husk. And this is something that all the farmers have. They have this leftover rice husk sitting around, and we were able to make a type of fertilizer from it. And this project was really special in a lot of ways because it's something that can be sustained, meaning that the vegetables grown in the garden were given to families in my school that really needed vegetables, families that were the poorest of poor in my village. And then the vegetables that weren't given to those families, we sold at the market. And the money used from those vegetables will go to buy other items to keep this project going. So rakes and shovels and other materials that they'll need in the future. Okay, this next slide is something that is really unique to my experience. I'm one of the only volunteers in Cambodia that had the opportunity to work with the Navy Seabees. And by having them come to my school, I was able to expand my project even bigger. And one of the things that they did was they built this really, really nice fire pit for my school. So all that trash that we gathered and collected had a place to burn it and utilize the facilities. And then this picture in the middle is the school library. And the school library was really run down, and so I was able to use their resources, and we were able to paint the library and get the library back into good condition. This picture on the right at the top is the Seabees doctor, and I utilized him because he's a man, for one, and in Cambodian culture, women aren't necessarily looked highly upon as being a strong leader, and they look more favorably on men to lead. And so I had him go to all the classrooms with me, and we helped teach about sanitation and good hygiene and just really basic things. Again, hand washing, cover your mouth when you cough. And then, let's see. This bottom picture here in the middle is one of my favorite pictures because my village and my school were really afraid of these guys when they showed up to my site because they're big, tall Americans and they're in their uniform. And as I've said earlier, the only thing some of these people knew about Americans, especially military, is that they're bad and they're here to harm you. And I had to tell my school, no, wait, they're good. They're going to help, and here's how they're going to help. And in the beginning of them coming, they were fearful and they didn't trust them. And at the end, some of these teachers used their own money to purchase them gifts and gave them as a way to say thank you. And it was one of my favorite moments. Okay. Here's another picture. The top picture is the typical classroom I taught in. I had 50 to 60 students in all of my classes. They sat in just solid wood, straight, flat desk for hours and hours a day. And it's hot. It's really hot there. And then this bottom corner is one of my favorite classes. So you can. And then another picture of them working in the projects. And one of the things that I liked about the garden project that we did, so the grant that I wrote allowed us to buy trees and flowers and build these flower beds. And we built 13 30 feet raised flower beds throughout the school. And I had to use all of the students to help fill those beds and all of the students to plant flowers and plants. And they did, and they loved it, because for the first time in their life, they took pride in their school and they wanted to improve it. And I saw a really big shift. One of the things that I'm jumping ahead, but towards the end of my time being there, each teacher was responsible for a different flower bed, and they were competing with their classes to see whose flower bed looked the best. And then more pictures of the students planting and painting the school, and then my fence. They call it my fence. I don't know why. Okay. So my Peace Corps experience obviously wasn't all joys, right? I definitely had some valleys that I had to climb out of. I had some challenges that I had to really face and overcome, so I want to talk about those. The picture to the right is my cohort. Those are the people that trained with me, they swore in with me. They were supposed to be my best friends and help get me through this experience. But they were my biggest challenge. My cohort was probably the one thing that I struggled with the most. And the reason why was because of those people in that picture, there are 3 that would stand here and say, I am a Christian. And that was it. And so we were persecuted. We were ignored. We were made fun of. We were mocked. Modern day persecution. They didn't want to be friends with us, and they didn't like us. And so I had to work through that and lean on God and lean on the 2 girls that were there. We had to really lean on each other to work through that process. The other picture is some of my chickens, and they're running through the kitchen. That is our kitchen. And I really struggled with the chickens. And we had this rooster who, I think he knew every time I wanted to take a nap. So I had the rooster and the chickens. And we'll get to that later. Okay, so the picture to the left is, I think it's a snake. I'm not really sure. I was given a lot of food. I wasn't really sure what it was, and that's okay. In the beginning, I think it was kind of let's see if she'll eat it game. And so finally, host mom discovered I wasn't going to eat some things, and we had to work through that and find things that I would eat. And my host mom is a saint because she would cook things literally just so I could eat sometimes. And then, again, the trash in Cambodia. The picture on the left is the heat. And that doesn't include humidity in Cambodia. And so I really struggled with heat. I struggled with heat rashes. There were nights that the sweat was, I couldn't tell the sweat between the tears because it was so hot. And then this picture to the right is a table of raw meat. And this is taken before a wedding that I helped with. And what you don't see in the picture, because I didn't take it, was there's a lady sitting over to the right who's also cutting vegetables. And so the concept of sanitation and cross-contamination and all of these things that we all know, they don't and they didn't want to hear it from me. And so at this wedding, I went to help. My host mom took me as also a way to show that I was there integrating. And I was cutting vegetables, and I thought I was doing really good, and I was trying really hard. And this lady comes up to me in her Khmer polite way and says, "You're doing that wrong." And I said, "How can I do it wrong? Like, I'm cutting the vegetables." And she showed me their proper way to cut, and so I tried it, and I'm not very good at it because I have never had to do it that way. And I learned a very valuable lesson, that there's sometimes more than one way to do something, and that's okay. I learned that. She didn't learn that, and that's also okay. And I wasn't allowed to cut any more vegetables after that. So to the left is laundry. That's my bucket of laundry. And in the beginning, laundry was a big challenge for me. I didn't like it. It took half my day. I didn't have much free time, and so I felt like that was my time. And then the middle picture is a catfish, I think, and then the food again. So the food and different things were a big struggle for me. To the right is a picture of a road that I would take to get in and out of my village. And during rainy season, as you can see from the picture, there gets to be big, gaping, almost mud pits where cars can't really get in and out, and that's isolating. And I was the only volunteer in my village. I was the only volunteer, the closest volunteer to me was about 20 kilometers away, so over an hour bike ride. And I try to leave the village about once a month just to get out, talk English with someone. And sometimes I couldn't because it was too difficult to come in and out, and that became really difficult for me. The picture on the left at the top is me inside a van. Like if you see this yellow van on the other picture. Those vans are 12 to 15 passenger vans, and there's 35 people in that picture. And there's usually always a chicken, sometimes there's a pig, and there's usually always a moto strapped to the back. And there weren't comfortable rides, there was no air conditioning, and it was tight. It was really tight. The bottom picture is my Christmas decorations that was sent in a care package. And that's up there because my very first Christmas in Cambodia was my lowest low. It was the hardest time that I had. It was the time that I said, I want to come home, and I was told no. And I told them, my parents them, before I got into this journey, I said, you can't ever tell me to come home. And they didn't. They never told me to come home. They were very encouraging. So I want to go back uphill. So those were some of my challenges. The picture on the left is a live chicken. It was my first gift in Cambodia. And it's really special to me because giving someone a chicken is giving a whole family and plus some a meal. And for this man to give me a chicken was a really big sacrifice for him, and it meant a lot to me. And then to the right is where I would do laundry every week. And laundry I shifted from this day that I hated, I didn't want to do laundry, sometimes it rained and my clothes didn't dry, to this was my time, this was when I worshiped, this is when I listened to my Jesus music. My family left me alone because they didn't want to help do my laundry. People knew that was my time, and so I began to look forward to laundry day. It began to be something that was really special to me, and it was a time that I really cherished. And then the picture on the right is me in the hammock. And I hated the hammock at first, and I kind of refused it because being in the hammock meant that I had nothing to do. It meant that school wasn't started. there wasn't things to do in my village, my projects weren't started, but the hammock time also began to be a place where I could become closer to God. I read my Bible. That's where I did my devotions. It's also when students would come up to me and say, "Hey, teacher, are you a Christian?" And I would say, "Yes." And those moments became really special because in Peace Corps, I can't go out and evangelize. I can't start the conversation. But if someone comes up to me and starts the conversation, then I can continue it. And before I left for Peace Corps, I had people criticize me and say, "Well, if you want to do mission work, then why are you going to Peace Corps?" Well, God uses people in a lot of different ways, and you don't always have to be in a sponsored church to go do mission work. And I opened my heart and prayed that God would bring the people to me that needed to be brought and that I could reach the people, and He did. And He brought the people to me, and He had the people start the conversation with me. And then the picture to the left is my host mom and all of our chickens. And there's probably about 20 chickens in that picture. And so chickens would run under the hammock and jump on the hammock, and the chickens. Okay, so this video is an example of a volunteer's house, and I just want you to see what we typically live in.
Hey guys, my name is Weston. This is my Cambodian home. Welcome to Cambodia. Come on in and take a look. It's not very big, maybe a little bit like a chicken coop, but hey, it serves the purpose. Got all the area for my clothes. These are my shirts. Of course, we have the mosquito net. You can't let those mosquitoes bite at night, especially here in Cambodia. Got my host dad right here. That's my host mom, and then my little host sister right there. And of course, me. This is the camera that I take out everywhere I go, along with one other little camera. But yeah, this goes to like all the weddings with me, goes to like every ceremony I go to, goes all the way down the village, all the way down the roads. And because I have to take pictures of this experience, great. So we're in the family room right now. Sometimes we hang out here, watch TV at night. We don't watch a whole lot of TV, but late at night we do. Some events, and my family sleeps on. That right over in the other side of the wall. That's what that room is. Alright, so we're downstairs right now on the bottom floor of our house. Like I said, it's a stilted house, so the house is raised by these stilts. It's a great place for everyone to just kind of hang out, have a meal. We sometimes eat at this table, and sometimes my family's eating at this table right here. We just sit on top of it and eat our meal. And you can see those hammocks. Everyone's kind of chilling in a hammock right now. Very typical in Cambodian culture. Hammocks are everywhere. Great to just sort of relax and hang out. It's nice and breezy, nice and shady, of course, down here. You can stay out of the sun and just sort of hang out with the family and friends who come and visit. That's great. You can see on the bottom of the house here, there are all these different numbers on planks of wood. And all those numbers are important telephone numbers for people in the community, maybe certain police or taxi drivers. Well, you guessed it. This is the bathroom. You can see my shoes sitting outside here. Simply take your shoes off before you enter the building. Might be a little bit taking used to, but hey, it's pretty easy to use. You just stand right on those things, right on the side there. Do your business. All good. We're amazing at running water in Cambodia here. So, my family has this really big blue container that we collect rainwater in. And you can see it's sort of a contraption right up on the top here with all these different PVC pipes. So when it rains, it all runs off of the top of the roof, onto this next layer of tin, and then in have an experience working as a Peace Corps volunteer in Cambodia because it's so interesting how so many different levels. Not only are the people so incredibly friendly and willing to help and teach me about their culture, it's been a great way for me to teach them about American culture as well. Cambodia, I think, if I know, will always have a really special place in my heart. I forever have family here for sure. Whether it's my host family, community members, and the village. Well, yes, thanks for checking out my Cambodian house, but you gotta go. It's time for me to take out.
You can go to the next slide.
Maybe.
So this is my house, the house that I lived in for 2 years. Go to the next slide. This is my bedroom. I had a mosquito net that I had to sleep in at night. At my house, we did not have electricity, so we used a car battery and solar panels. And this is the bathroom that I used, and I was really lucky because I had a Western toilet at my house, but we had no running water, so you still had to scoop all the water and do it like that. This is the Wat, the temples, and as I said earlier, to be integrated in my community, I had to go with my family. I had to participate in as much of the Khmer culture as I could to integrate. And the temples and the Wats are central in every village. Every village has their main Wat, and that's where they all go. And it's really important. They have community events there. They raise money at the Wats. So it's a huge area of the life in Cambodia. This was a wedding that I was in. I was a bridesmaid in this wedding, and she is one of the teachers at the school that I taught with. This is Mr. Lundy. Mr. Lundy was my school director, and Mr. Lundy is not your typical Khmer principal, I guess, if you will. Being a principal is a political position, so to speak, but Mr. Lundy did not let that attack his morals. And Mr. Lundy really surprised me at times. My favorite story of Mr. Lundy and I is concerning my projects. And the goal in all of the projects is that they become sustainable, meaning all the things we do teaches them to get ready for me to leave, and that they can continue the project. And for weeks and weeks and weeks and months, I said, Mr. Lundy, we need to sit down, we need to make a plan. Mr. Lundy, we need to meet, do you have time to meet? And he's like, yeah, I got it. And so one day I come to school, and Mr. Lundy's there, and he shows me a map of the school that he did on his computer, and it had every flower bed in our school garden, and it had a teacher's name assigned to that flower bed, and he had made this plan all on his own. And it was a really special moment because he listened. He was listening to me the whole time, and he wanted the project to continue. And Mr. Lundy's also really special because he lets mission groups come into the school and do work even when the village chiefs sometimes say no. This is my host mom, and my host mom is one of the most special people from my experience. Host mom took really good care of me, meaning she learned what I would eat and would cook it. She would tell me I couldn't wear something to a wedding and go pick out what I was supposed to wear. She encouraged me, and if she thought I was sad, she would say, you haven't exercised lately, don't you want to go exercise? Host mom was my biggest supporter in Cambodia. And the best example that I can give is I was working on my project, and I came home one day, and I was really frustrated because things weren't going right. And I was on this time schedule, and nothing goes right, but that's okay. And so she says, well, tell me about it, like what's happening. And I tell her, and I said, I need dirt in the flower bed so I can plant the flowers. We have all these flowers delivered. I need to plant these flowers. And she said, okay, I'm going to school tomorrow. And I said, okay, why? So she comes to school the next day, and she struts through the yard, and she stops and she takes inventory of everything that's happening. And then I have two other teachers with me, and she goes up to those teachers and in a very aggressive voice, and she's saying something in slang that I don't understand, and she's kind of yelling, which is not Khmer culture. It's not appropriate for her to yell like this. And she turns around and kind of does this like satisfied nod, and she walks away. And I go up to the teachers and I said, what just happened? What did she say? And they said, everything's going to be taken care of. Everything will be okay. I have no idea what she said. No one ever told me. All I know is that the dirt got in the flower beds and the flowers got planted. And that's host mom. And host mom liked to drag me to weddings and to the Watt and to celebrations, and she wanted me to be seen in the culture, and she wanted people to know that I was there and my heart was there for the right place. And then this is my family, and we have host dad, my brother, my sister, grandpa, and of course mom. So this is, I guess, my last few moments in Cambodia. The picture on the upper left is my family. The picture to the right and on the bottom are some of my friends from the school and teachers that I taught with. And this is at the airport before I left. And they came all the way from my really, really small village that's hard to get in and out of in the middle of rainy season. They left their jobs, they left everything to make the journey to the capital to come tell me bye. And that's a huge sacrifice for them. And it really showed me how much they really loved me and cared about me. And these are my co-teachers. I taught with two teachers while I was in Cambodia. The one on the left I taught with for 1 year, and the one on the right I taught with for 2 years. And these guys became my best friends. I saw them every day at school. We lesson planned together. They saw me when I was mad, when I was sad, when I was happy, when I was sick. Sometimes they would tell me to go home because I guess I didn't look good. They really liked to plan test days when they knew I would be gone because apparently Americans are strict, they tell me, and I don't let kids cheat. And but they were my best friends, and they helped get me through some days that were hard. And then rice. In Cambodia, rice is everything. And especially my village because I was in a farming village. And there are two pictures where I'm in a rice paddy, and host mom got me in a rice paddy and tried to teach me how to plant rice one day. And I tried for a while and I wasn't doing a very good job, and she told me to go home. But the proudest I ever saw my host mom was the day that I helped her plant rice. She was really proud of me that day. And then the food, the picture in the middle is, in Khmer it's called chai lambo. It's a type of squash pumpkin. It's like a stir fry, and that was one of my favorite dishes. And the last week I was there, my host mom said, you know, what do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? Because she wanted to fix me all my favorite foods. And one day I said, oh, I want chai lambo. And she laughed. And she said, why do you want this? And I said, it's good, and we don't have it in America. And she said, but this is what you eat when you're poor. This is what you eat when you have no money. And she wanted to fix me something that was of her worth to me. And but that's what I wanted, and she fixed it. So you can go. This is also one of my favorite foods. It's a type of kind of like a smoked pork. and it's really expensive. It's only used usually at a ceremony or a wedding or a funeral, and so if there was a ceremony and my host mom knew this was going to be served, she would take her little baggie and go and get enough to give me for dinner that night because she knew I liked it. And then these are some of my favorite pictures. So when I got to Cambodia, all I saw was the trash and the dirt and how everything was not sanitary and it was dirty. And then I left Cambodia, and this is what I see. And I see the beauty, and I see the water lilies and the palm trees, and my host mom in a rice field. And then, of course, I got to travel while I was abroad. And then I got to see my aunt. You can go to the next one. This is some pictures of some of the markets there. And it's just very different than, obviously, the supermarkets that we have in America. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Oh, okay. No questions? Okay, I have 2 more slides, I think, so we can, this is just kind of a funny joke, I guess. But, so it says, what my friends think I do, I'm riding an elephant. What my mom thinks I do, I'm Mother Teresa. What the government thinks I do. What the locals think I do, because they're very skeptical of us for a while. What I think I do, and then obviously what I really do. Okay, and then the last slide, and this is what I'm ending with. So to end, I guess I want to say there's no way I could have done this journey without the love and support of my church family, knowing that you all were here praying for me, getting the notes in my care packages, knowing that I had the support and the love here pushing me through. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for that.
Lord, we thank you so much for this great day of being at your house. Lord, we thank you for Christy and for her family. And Lord, we just thank you for being able to be just a small part of her ministry. Lord, we know that you have some great things in store for her for the remainder of her days here on this earth. Lord, bless her, dear Lord, as she takes those opportunities, as those doors are open to her. We pray for her host family and for everyone at that school, dear Lord, how much better their life is today because they were touched by Christy and they were touched by you. Go with us.